Everyone. We'll be going through the topic discussion of fatigue management today. Before going towards the main part of fatigue management, I would like to have a discussion on 3 or 4 slides regarding how fatigue due to sleep deprivation can cause an impairment in performance, how it goes, how the experiments have shown it to be. So let us first dive into that, and then we'll go to the proper. Okay. So there have been experiments which have shown differently how the fatigue after a sleep deprivation can cause impairment in the performance. So it is a very general fact that obviously sleep deprivation will cause some impairment, but how it causes and what are the attributes to it, that we can find out in this experiment. So this is one experiment where they have seen in a 60-hour sleep deprived person, they have given those persons a 10-minute psychovigilance task. Now, upon that task, there has been varying levels of attention that has been required in the task. So they have measured the reaction times, and the greater the reaction times, you can see with these simple bars, the greater the reaction times, the more time the person has taken for completing that aspect of the task. So this is a 10-minute task in a 60-hour sleep deprived person. Now, as you can see, the demands of the tasks are not always same. So it has been low at times and it has been high at times. Generally, you can see whenever the demand gets higher, like in here and here, you can see the reaction time also increases. So he is already sleep deprived. He has difficulty in completing the task, and the demand is furthermore the demand is higher. So the reaction time increases further. This leads to an impact in the performance failure. So this leads to greater risks of performance failure. So it is not only the sleep loss induced instability in the performance, it is also the attributes of the task, of how the task varies in its demands. So if the demands for cognitive processing are high during periods of inattentiveness, the likelihood of human error increases. Now, take an example of driving a car. So if the person is sleep deprived, he's driving a car, intersection of roads crossing comes, traffic light comes, and he is going without a brake. He doesn't bother to stop at the traffic lights, going without a brake. Another car enters, definitely there will be a chance of accident. However, if we just take out if we just take out this intersection and intersection of roads, if this didn't occur at all, then maybe we would not have this accident at all. So the demand of the task increases. He was already in a partially inattentive state. The demand of the task increased, and that's why there was a probability of accident. So thus the accident risk is proportional to both the cumulative time of inattentiveness, so the accumulated time where in which inattentiveness is present, and also the density of these critical task events. So if there are more task events, there would be greater probability of risks, or greater probability of errors. This is another experiment where you can see that there is a 40-hour sleep deprivation. So the 40-hour sleep deprivation in a person. Now what? So let us understand this task. This is one task where the patient is obviously been deprived of sleep for 40 hours. Now you can see that there are the triangles which are connected by single lines. Okay, so these represent what? These represent the 10-minute psychovigilance task. The upper triangle is the first minute of task, and the lower triangle is the 10th minute of task. So they have what they have done. They have just divided the psychovigilance task, 10-minute task, into 1-minute beans each. So if you can see that this from the upper triangle to the lower triangle, there will be actually 10 triangles. So each of them are a 1 minute bin of task for the psychovigilance task. So each of these conglomerates have 10 triangles each. Now, the first triangle is the first minute and the last triangle is the 10th minute. So as you can see, for each of the tasks, there has been deterioration in the speed from the first minute to the 10th minute, which is acceptable. We know that there will be some lack of motivation. There will be some decline in the, because of the monotonous nature of the task, there will be some decline in the speed. Okay. So that is there. Now, if you see the general task over time, now that this graph goes, it dips from 8 a.m. in the first day when the patient is actually not sleep deprived to 8 a.m. in the second day when the patient is sleep deprived for a whole day. So it has dipped down. And there is a general recovery after that because of the circadian rhythm of alertness. However, as we can see, even during the dipping down, the 10th task is still below the next first minute of the next task. So when we give a rest interval between this, as I am showing here, between the two tasks, even if it is during the sleep deprivation, it will still improve the performance to some extent. So that is what has been told here, that although there is a general decline of tasks as we go with sleep deprivation, still rest to some extent improves the performance of the task partially. So as you can see here, that rest mediated cognitive restoration and also restoration of motivation takes place. That's why there is an improvement from the 10th minute of the previous task to the first minute of the next task, even if there is sleep deprivation. So from that, what we can say is that impairment due to the time on task or impairment due to the monotonous task is recovered by rest, which is time off, and impairment due to sleep loss can only be managed by recovery sleep. So these are the two different aspects of the impairment of task that can take place. So rest will improve some of it, and sleep will improve that part which has been lost by sleep loss. Okay. Right. Impairment also occurs in the dynamic decision making due to sleep loss. So it has caused this something called as feedback blunting. So impaired ability to use any feedback in modifying a pre-existing decision process. So maybe I had predetermined my decision to a certain set of rules. Now a surprise element comes in my real life situation. Then I will have a difficulty in modifying that decision, which will actually try to solve the problem if I am sleep deprived. So the dynamic decision making is affected. For this, they had actually gone through a go no go reversal learning task. We already know the go no go task, which basically means that if I can explain simply, like some set of numbers are given and they are told that if even numbers, this is just an example, there are very many variations of the task. Even if even numbers appear, it means that you have to go means you can tap the finger or you can write somewhere, or if some odd numbers appear, you have to do just the opposite. So this set of rules had been given to the participants. Now midway between the tasks, what they do, they just reverse the rules unexpectedly. They didn't tell the participants previously, they just reverse the rules. Now they have seen that after reversing the rules, the sleep deprived individuals had difficulty in adaptation to the rules, to the new set of rules. But the person who were not sleep deprived, they modified accordingly and they completed the task very easily. So this is the dynamic attentional control which is affected during the sleep deprivation. Okay, so some excerpts regarding the functional brain imaging. Generally, they have said that during sleep deprivation, most areas in the brain, be it the prefrontal cortex, the superior inferior parietal cortex, thalamus, they have low activity if the sleep deprivation is there. PET studies have revealed that wakefulness after sleep deprivation is associated with greater reductions in brain activity in association cortices, in thalamus, compared to the normal wakefulness. So almost similar findings. Now, what we say about the immediate post-awakening period, we say that it is a period of sleep inertia. So this period is characterized by some performance deficits, by some mental grogginess, some sleepiness, and it will be dissipating within 30 minutes or so. In this area, actually, they have performed an experiment. What this diagram shows is that this neuroimaging they have done. What they have done is that from 5 minutes of post awakening period to 20 minutes of post awakening period, during this time, what is the change in activity of the brain that they have mapped out. Okay, now the yellow areas actually represent that there is a positive change, there is a increase in the activity on the brain, whereas the pink red areas represent there is a decrease in the activity of the brain. So they have found out that across 5 minutes to 20 minutes after awakening, that there in the prefrontal cortices, you generally find an increase in the activity of the brain, whereas in the centroencephalic regions, in these regions, the posterior regions, you find that there is the decrease in the activity of the brain. So these are this basically is the brain imaging at different levels, as you can see here, from upper to lower. So from upper to lower side. And so there is this differential increase in activity and decrease in activity upon waking up from immediate post-waking period to the gradual getting out of the grogginess part or the sleep inertia part. So there is definitely increase in the prefrontal activity in the brain. Just to summarize before diving into the fatigue countermeasures, as you can see that neurobiological differences in this big circle, neurobiological differences will be always there in an individual. Work hours, the timing of work hours, the type of work, the duration of work, that will also vary with the different work that the person does. These and this work hours and neurobiological differences will interact among each other. Sleep homeostasis will be varied due to that. Biological clock is different in different persons. There will be some differences. Now, because of these things, there will be definitely some varying sleepiness and cognitive impairment in different workers. This will lead to, when the task is given, this will lead to the performance instability, and the attentional control will be varying in these persons. If it is on the negative side, if the instability is more, if the attentional control is not the attentional control is not very good, if the attentional control is not very good, it will result in the errors and accidents. Now, for the fatigue countermeasures, generally we can act on the work culture of or the work type, the work settings of the individuals. We can act on the sleep part, the sleep schedule of the individuals. We can act on their biological clocks. We can act on their whole sleepiness as a whole. We can actually moderate the light and dark exposure and act upon their sleepiness, biological clocks. We can modulate the environmental factors. How we'll do that? We'll be coming on in the later slides. So these things we can actually modify to better the work culture, to better the chances of having reduced fatigue, and ultimately improving performance and decreasing the risk of errors and accidents. So this is the whole diagram of how we'll go about planning the fatigue countermeasures. Now, first we have to define fatigue. Obviously, there are variety of definitions. They vary according to their workplaces. They vary according to the severity of work, what will I say, the seriousness of work. Not every work has the same high risk characteristic to it. So the International Civil Aviation Organizations, aviation part is just a minute, some disturbance. Aviation sector is one sector where the effects of fatigue were studied very early, and it were actually the management part was also brought in. So International Civil Aviation Organization has defined it as a physiological state of reduced mental or physical performance capability resulting from sleep loss, extended wakefulness, circadian phase, and or workload that can impair a person's alertness and ability to perform safety related operational duties. However, you have to see that this definition does not anywhere mention the innate motivation of the person, the willingness of the person to work. That has not been mentioned. Also, there are some shortfalls regarding this definition, like this definition nowhere mentions that the person already ill or the person who is having disease activity going on with himself, be it for a prolonged time, be it for a transient time, that has not been accounted for in the definition. The outside environment, how the natural factors or the artificial factors in the outside environment, the light factor, the weather, the climate, and the outside what will I say, outside city culture, outside outside surroundings, how they behave, that will also affect the jobs in different way. The outside the jobs which are not inside the offices, those which are outside will be affected by the weather, by the climate of that area. And the stress outside workplace, that means personal stress, the stress a worker faces in his house, in his different aspects of life other than work, that has also not been accounted in this definition. But still, this definition has summed up most of the things that a person can face in the workplace, but not outside it. So there are actually some models of fatigue which have been described here. There are some concepts that has to be described, after which we can go to the how we'll proof against that fatigue, or how we'll adapt fatigue countermeasures. So previously, traditionally, it has been seen that the deficit model of safety was often being used for fatigue. Like fatigue means performance impairment. That was what was generally believed. But it actually did not take into account a very important part, the human intelligence. So human intelligence often has the ability to anticipate the challenge, to change the management strategies according to the current, according to the present requirement of the individual. He or she understands what he or she is going through, how his energy levels are, how his attention levels are, and then they can adjust accordingly. So after fatigue, it is not a robot that he will the worker will only do a performance impairment, but not adjust this adequately. So fatigue proofing rejects this simplistic notion of fatigue. So it is not a simple notion that fatigue has to be related with performance impairment. Rather, fatigue is associated with positive behavioral modifications, and that protects the actual job performance. So the safety is also maintained, the job performance is protected. However, behavioral modifications has to be done. Now there is another concept, which is safety 2 model. So this model is defined as to make dynamic trade-offs and to adjust performance in order to meet changing demands and to deal with disturbances and surprises. You can actually think that the intelligence part has been accounted for here. So this is actually more closer to the concept of fatigue proofing. So fatigue can be told as a natural variation, of how the person will perform. So the full spectrum of fatigue proofing strategies would actually include behavioral strategies in addition to the pharmacological ones, because the person's behavioral modifications are already present when fatigue sets in. So we can just modify those behavior. We can reinforce those behavior which are helpful and act accordingly, rather than only going to the pharmacological ones. So for example, like in a driver, if you see that the driver knows that he is sleep deprived and he is being fatigued. If a driver is very anxious in nature, maybe what he will do, he will just go to the utmost left side of the road where maybe the traffic moves slow, and he will drive slowly. He knows that I am fatigued. I can do some errand mistakes if I drive very fast. So he will actually go down to the safer zone of the road. Whereas a driver with impulsive nature might not do so. He might think that, okay, I can actually go through the traffic in speed only, I can manage my fatigue, and then maybe later on when I have to ultimately stop off, then only I'll go to the left side of the road, otherwise not. So persons will behave differently according to their personality, according to their intelligence, and manage fatigue in their own way. What we have to do is that we have to tone down this, or maybe modify, maybe moderate these personality traits or these adaptations. That is the only thing that we need to do during the adapting the fatigue countermeasures. Again, a similar concept of compensatory control and effort. So what the person has, what resources they have, that has to be allocated dynamically. So this cognitive energetical framework is also the same framework that says the energy expenditure or the activities of the person actually can be consciously moderated or increased or decreased in response to the work demands. We can go back to the first experiment example also, that when the work demand increases, there are more chances of error. So in those more chances of error, we can modify the behavior of the person according to his or her capabilities. So the negative impact of fatigue on performance can be actually balanced by this dynamic allocation of effort in response to the varying work. So if we distribute the effort in a very reasonable, rational manner, we can actually deal with the fatigue much more efficiently. Here comes another concept of non-technical skills and teamwork. I must tell you on beforehand only that these are mostly concepts which has been developed in the aviation industry. So these non-technical skills and teamwork are a set of skills that the flight crew members have, which are not related to the flight per se, but they are related to communication, to how the team gels in, how it is not in the engineering set of skills. It is more in the non-technical part. So they have seen that if also the patient is fatigued, there is fatigue after a long 10 hours flight. If the pilots are, if the crew members are fatigued, still they counter it with the teamwork that they have, with the ease of communication that they have, with the body language that they have. So whenever they have undergone a 10-hour flight, they gel in much more. They can understand each other much better, because the flight crew members keep on changing. They are never the same team, but they counter it with this non-technical skills. However, in a fresh flight with non-sleep deprived or fresh members, we have it has been seen that there has often been errors due to lack of communication, lack of teamwork. So it goes, it is not a one-way traffic that fatigue will impair performance ultimately, but some skills are there which will actually counter this negative effects of fatigue, non-technical skills being one of them. Fatigue proofing will also involve two very important aspects. One is the fatigue detection technologies, and one is resilience engineering or error tolerant designs. What is fatigue detection technologies? Let me give you an example. In India, we have started it maybe, but in the Western nations, previously also it was there in trains, mostly in trains. What they had was a pedal or a switch that they have to be pressed most of the time by the driver. Now, if the driver is fatigued, maybe there will be a release in his pressure, and it will not be pressed. It will not be pressed, and the machine detects it. And what they does in two steps, they signal the driver. What they do, first of all, there will be an alarm set off. If the driver still doesn't pay attention to this, what they will do is that they will apply emergency brakes to the engines. So this is a very this is a one of the very large number of examples that can be given, which is in place for fatigue detection. Even in cars, we have seen in partial automation, there are certain technologies that can detect fatigue. In India now, maybe in the high-end trains, in the modern equipment that they are actually creating, there are facilities for this. What do you mean by error tolerant designs? So if we do away with the concept that fatigue has to be related with performance impairment, if we just forget this concept, there will be some designs which will be flexible in nature. Like most of us have designs that there are very rigid SOPs, there are very rigid rules about workplace, timings, duration of rest, break times. Everything is very rigid. Then it will be more brittle in nature. So it will be the workers, obviously they have individual differences in them to be fatigued, and they will not be able to adhere to the same rigid rules and ultimately lead to some workplace distress. But if these are not rigid, if they are individualized to the worker to some extent. Obviously, all the rules cannot be individualized, but some rules, if they are individualized and they are modified, then we can have error tolerant designs, which basically means that we have to flexible with the rules, and not only the rules, the regulations, what let's say, the opportunities that a worker gets, um, uh, the holidays that he gets, the incentives that he or she gets. So that has also to be modified. So let us come to the principles of fatigue mitigation. So these are mostly pertinent to this sleep deprivation, restriction or fragmentation, and these are not pertinent to non-sleep related fatigue. These are mostly pertinent to sleep related fatigue. So as you can see, the strategies are behavioral, environmental, technological, and pharmacological. So we'll come to this one by one. Napping. So in behavioral strategies, napping is one. Even nowadays, you are seeing that there's a whole lot of napping culture that's been doing the rounds in the internet. So it can be preventive in nature, it can be operational or within work. So banking sleep is one concept that they give. It basically means that you bank your sleep, you preempt that you will require a period of wakefulness. That's why you sleep earlier, you preserve your sleep to some extent, and then you tend to be awake at the cost of that previously slept period. Now, nap timing will also have to be very meticulous. It cannot be at any time. It has to be matched with the circadian rhythm of the person, with the timing of the work that they are doing. It will vary according to the shift works. So the nap timing has to be determined in a very thoughtful way. Duration of naps, there has been experiments that there has been studies that show that they have tried to give in a parallel, like 15 minutes of nap duration will mean 2 hours of better work, 4 hours of nap duration will mean 10 hours of better work, and they vary with their numbers. Different studies vary, but these are some of the few very unanimous examples that has been given. So duration does matter. Sleep inertia, as I told you previously, will be there for the initial half an hour, but then after that it will be smooth. There are various nap barriers existing till today, and we in our country can see it very well. Like if we nap around, the first barrier will be with the co-workers, with your superiors. That how are you taking a like sleeping break while on work? So if no one can just sleep away and the superiors won't see it. It will not be the case. These are the societal influences. How the company regulations how the company regulations are placed regarding this napping. How the environment, the work environment, the lighting of the place, the napping area. Is there any separate napping area? Those are all the things that has to be taken in account before telling that our workplace has a napping culture. You can't just tell not do anything about the workplace and tell that we have a napping culture. No, there has to be a specific area for that. Again, aviation industry comes very prominent in this aspect. In the ultra long range flights, the flights more than 16 hours, they definitely have an area where the flight crew, the pilots can actually sleep with the full supine position. They have those kind of facilities. So the aviation sector has done a lot in this respect. Some rest breaks are obviously that have already mentioned in the previous experiment, that periods of rest between the continuous work will actually help the person. But some people differ in whether listening to music or exercises will help in between the work, because that varies. There is no unanimous result whether they will help or be counterproductive. That has varied. You can see some drivers listening to music to keep themselves awake during driving for long distances. So it varies with person to person. Environmental strategies, obviously, even in schools, we have seen light exposure has to be very accurate. Even in our workplaces, it is the same. Sound and temperature manipulation has little effect, so we'll mainly focus on the light exposure manipulation. Sunlight is the best if we can get that very decent sunlight, that can be indirect sunlight that can be there in the office or in the workplace per se. Blue green light is also good, has acute positive effects on alertness and performance. Correct timing of exposure is very important. So if we try to what will I say, approximate that sunlight during the evening hours, that will not be obviously very good. It has to be during the morning hours and with the natural bit of sunlight. Unwanted light exposure is also has to be avoided. So as light exposure is essential, unwanted light exposure is also counterproductive. So like we say in our shift workers, we say that during getting back from work from the night shift, we often advise light blocking the sunglasses. We often advise blue light blocking sunglasses. That has to be I think that most of us know that blue filter sunglasses are actually very beneficial for those persons. They will actually retain the circadian rhythm of the person. Even smartphone and tablets have been covered with blue light blocking filters nowadays. So that can be an asset. So the correct timing of this of avoiding this unwanted light exposure has to be ascertained. I think more of the details regarding this will be covered in the respective chapters of shift work and jet lag. So we'll cover when a person needs to avoid light, when they need to give light exposure during eastward travel or westward travel. That will cover in the successive chapters. Technological strategies. What can we do to detect fatigue? So some have suggested that ocular monitoring can be a marker for fatigue. So pupillary instability can be measured. Lots of false positive and false negative are obviously there, because pupillary instability doesn't always depend only on the fatigue. Depends on the whole biological makeup of the individual, other anxiety levels going on, the other things the person is thinking, maybe in the back of his mind, other than what. So ocular measures can also be confounded by light conditions and other factors, obviously. Physiological monitoring, EEG, ERP, HRV, all these things, heart rate variability, they can be used for alertness tracking, but they are only good for laboratory monitoring, but not feasible for workplace monitoring. They will not be very useful. On-duty head positioning monitoring. So sudden head snapbacks often denote that the person is falling asleep. Serious compromise of work would have been done by that time. So not feasible for operational context. So it is already, the person must be tired and he has done a lot of errors, because before head snapping also, person may have done some errors. So that is not a very good way of monitoring. Some people tell that obviously on-duty task performance monitoring. So generally in driving, there are in some roads there are this in the edges of the road there are this rumbles strips. So whenever a person is fatigued and maybe going into sleep and just veering away from the highway or maybe the road, he will face this in-ground rumble and the sound will increase, and maybe because of that he will awaken. So it is also not only a monitoring purpose but also a correctional way of how to manage fatigue in drivers. So some roads are equipped with that. They have said that partial automation to some extent reduces the human error, but partial automation also makes the person very lax, makes the person very easygoing. So he will not be giving that much attention to the roads as he used to give when there was no automation. So it can actually, whenever there is when the partial automation is lost, the person actually faces much more difficulty. So full automation might be a solution, but not partial automation. Full automatic vehicles might be a solution, but not partially automatic vehicles. And again, that will depend on the type of roads, the type of traffic regulations a country follows. Pharmacological strategies, we know about this and we'll discuss it at a later stage. So various types of benzodiazepines and other related or maybe non-related pharmacological agents that can induce sleep, that can maintain sleep. Correct choice is obviously essential. Which one to give at short acting, long acting, at which type of insomnia, which timing we have to give, that will be varied, obviously. So in like in addition to addition to increasing sleep, we also need to increase alertness by some agents like modafinil or modafinil. Because of the low abuse potential, these are preferred than maybe a dextroamphetamine or methylamphetamine that will come in the schedule 2. So these agents will be much more preferred. Caffeine has been also been used, like in 200 to 600 milligram. They have been used for improved alertness. After going through the fatigue mitigation strategies, we have to accept that workplace fatigue is very unique in itself because it has some basic human rights related to it. Other fatigues than workplace will not maybe have a human right related to it, but this has. So just and favorable conditions of work, rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours, and enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health. These are similar workplace human rights that basic human rights that a person needs to have, be it most of the countries. Okay. So unions and organizations have been revising these working hours so that these human rights are met. The rest periods, the off days, they have been varying in different countries. So some system was developed like the FRMS and the SMS. FRMS is basically this fatigue risk management strategies, and safety management strategies is SMS. So these were developed to counter the evolution of fatigue. So FRMS will generally denote the modification and application of risk management processes. So it has both the monitoring part and also the application and modification part, whereas safety management strategy or SMS will have only the identification of the workplace hazards, mostly the monitoring. So again, International Civil Aviation Organization defines FRMS to be a data-driven means of continuously monitoring and managing fatigue-related safety risks based upon scientific principles, knowledge, and operational experience that aims to ensure relevant personnel are performing at adequate levels of alertness. So we can see that monitoring is a huge part of this risk management mitigation strategies, and also they are trying to manage it by certain countermeasures that we have already discussed. So who are the stakeholders in this? The managerial committee will be part of the decision making in this FRMS. Both employer-employee has to play a role. The role parameters has to be defined. They have in the policy itself. The company which proclaims that they have FRMS policy in place have to document all these things, and they have to have continuous documentation of this, of how their workers have responded to those risk mitigation strategies, how some risk has taken place and they have managed it, how they have taken preventive measures. All these things have to be documented by a company which proclaims that they have FRMS in place. So it's again a teamwork. It's not only on the worker or only the employer. As we can see in this diagram, the FRMS process are basically, it starts from fatigue monitoring to hazard identification, to risk assessment, again to fatigue mitigation. Now, in hazard identification, it can be the data can be taken predictively, like before the mishap takes place. Obviously, by mathematical modeling, the biomathematical modeling, they can predict a risk. By reactive states, which means after the risk has taken place, they can assess themselves and then try to predict, then try to be aware of that, be cautioned about those accidents, and obviously proactive data reporting. So data reporting by both the workers and the employers and the managers. Assessment means that every industry does not have the same type of severity or same type of high risk jobs. So risk stratification has to be done according to the type of job that they have. And mitigation, we have already discussed about the four processes of how preventive and operative fatigue mitigation can be done. So as low as possible, the risk has to be as low as possible. Now, with this is interconnected this safety assurance process, which is basically the SMS process that I was telling. This is the FRM and this is the SMS. So SMS, what it does, it also similarly has a role in identifying emerging hazards. So it has to be predicted again with the help of maybe biomathematical modeling or direct data given by the workers and the managers, and it has to be compared with some safety performance indicators. So these performance indicators are basically the maybe the work, let's say maybe the absenteeism, sickness absenteeism. It may be the attendance of the workers. The indicators might be the total productivity of the company, which may or may not be affected by this absenteeism. So there are certain performance indicators that are in place that will compare like the current FRMS, whether the current FRMS policy of the company meets meets to the level of the policy set in by the government of that country, that you have to meet these standards. Whether they are comparable or not, that will be compared by the SMS system, the safety management system, with the comparison of this safety performance indicators. So both of them has to be like the policy in place and the policy of the government. They has to be compared exactly to check whether FRMS is working as intended. I think we are coming to the last 3 or 4 slides. So a bit more about the aviation industry. They have already in the 90s itself. They have started this proactive data collection from both the cabin crew and the flight crew. Questionnaires on fatigue, performance, attention, through various severity rating scales, through various during the time that the flight is on pilot mode, or he is in or the pilot is the team of pilot is not working at that time. So there are 2 teams of pilots in long range flights. So they may fill these questionnaires to judge their performance and fatigue levels. Obviously, the pre-flight, in-flight, post-flight psychovigilance task had been undertaken. Every time a pilot will go into the flight or in between the flight, after the flight, they will be doing that. That has been done in certain long routes. Regular sleep diary maintenance, periodical actigraphy. These have already been done, and data has been managed. So for mitigating fatigue in ultra long range flights, which are basically more than 16 hours flights, there has to be scheduled in-flight rest periods. What they have found to be useful is that scheduled in-flight rest periods for crew, a minimum of 48 hours layover for at least 2 major sleep opportunities has to be given before the inbound flight, and protected time off duty before and after the trip. Like even if the flight schedule is because of the air traffic, because of various technical issues, if the flight schedule is extended, still the time off duty will be protected. It will not be biting into the timing of it will not be biting into the rest period. Rest period has to be protected. These are some of the principles that they have followed. Where I get this principle from is basically from the from some historical studies done on these routes. So Singapore, Los Angeles, Singapore, Atlanta, Mumbai, Atlanta, Singapore, Newark, New Jersey, Singapore, and Atlanta, Johannesburg, Atlanta. These are some of the ultra long range flights that has been studied. So what they have found, the main points from these flights that they have found, again, is a necessity of a 4 pilot crew, 2 chief pilots and 2 first officers. That will the 2 pilot team will be operating alternately. The pilots in-flight sleep facility that I have already told previously. They have an in-flight sleep facility. Meals, rest breaks, everything will be provided. The duration of those sleep would be like they will be given around 90 minutes to 105 minutes of sleep opportunity to initiate the sleep. So it will be quite a lot. So and the sleep can extend beyond that. So that has to be minimum, that has to be given. Layover of minimum 48 hours mentioned previously. The infrastructure of the hotels that the pilots are staying during the layover period has to be like he has to be in what will I say? It has to be such that the pilot does not face difficulty in initiating his or her rest or sleep period. So and they have to follow the home base time. So if a flight is taking off from Atlanta, it will go to Mumbai and then come back to Atlanta. Then the person has to stay in the base time of Atlanta. He or she should not adjust to the time of Mumbai. that has been one very important message that has been given to the flight crew. And the infrastructure should ensure that the hotels are well managed. The hotels are such that the crew will not be disturbed. If the flight and duty times exceed the prescriptive limits, the post-trip risk requirement should not be compromised with. Again, said earlier that the rest will be protected. The rest time will be protected. Coming to our last slide, obviously we'll have to talk about something about the healthcare industry. It is still evolving. It is very difficult to implement uniformly because the different work hours, the different emergency needs of this job, the different SOPs, the different off days, the departments, the workplace regulations will vary hugely. There is a huge amount of, if I can say that the standard deviation is huge. So not all health bodies across the world formally identifies workplace related fatigue. New Zealand does so. New Zealand Health and Safety at Work identifies fatigue as one of the cause of workplace hazards. Even they have said to that extent that fatigue may be pro-carcinogenic in nature by some of the studies. They have related those studies with cardiovascular diseases, with non-communicable diseases basically, and they have said that it might be pro-carcinogenic, the night work, the shift work. And there are so many studies regarding that. So New Zealand is one country which is identifying so. Maybe we'll obviously with more studies and more discussions and maybe sitting with the authority, maybe discussing with the authority, we can also develop similar programs. But then again, ours is a very diversified country with a lot of demands, lot of population. We have to think accordingly. We have to modify ourselves and the rules very differently. Thank you.
Thank you, Kosa, for a very wonderful presentation and making this complex topic so simple. So, friends, now if there are any discussion or comments or queries, I think we can continue.
I strongly feel fatigue is very high in health sector, particularly doctors. So I think we should think of fatigue management in doctors also.
So I want to add.
Yeah, ma'am, just responding to it. Sorry, sir, just interrupting. Obviously, it has to be managed very, like what will I say, prominently and importantly. But then again, as I have told, the rules are very different, and all the even if government sector agrees, the private sector may not be agreeing with certain rules, certain policies. So that is one challenge we have in our country. Yes, sir, please.
Yes. So apart from sleep duration and sleep duration because of either insufficient sleep syndrome or because of circadian disorders, the quality of sleep, I think, also affect the emergence of fatigue in these persons. Like if a patient is having obstructive sleep apnea, so sleep duration might be within normal limit, but because of arousals or vaso, yeah.
Sir, exactly, sir. I think you have stated a very good point. As you can see in this definition, that they have not taken the health issues into account. By health issues, we can mean the sleep disorders can also be present in the person, and obviously that will result in increased fatigability. So they have not taken into account, but we know that we have to take these things into account and
Yeah. So I think they haven't included a mandatory PSG before recruiting the cabin crew and pilots.
Sir, I am not sure. Basically, current regulations, I have to go deeper into that because this sector is one sector which is very definite with their rules, and maybe they have. I am not sure, but I have to go into it because this might the tests which are done before recruiting a pilot. My knowledge is actually like a decade old, so I am not very sure of the current scenario. I will go back to it and study and then maybe tell you.
Yes.
They keep changing actually, sir.
Mm-hmm. So in in the management of fatigue, apart from giving them nap trial, before that we need to identify the reason of improper sleep actually.
Yes.
डॉक्टर कौस्तुभ एक बार सेकंड स्लाइड पे आएंगे आपके?
Yes, ma'am. Just second. This one?
हाँ, ये वाला जो आपका पर्टिकुलर है सेकंड.
Yeah.
हाँ, इसमें जो आपने डिफाइन किया है कि सम अमाउंट ऑफ रेस्ट लीड्स टू इम्प्रूवमेंट इन वर्क, राइट?
Yes.
तो वो कितना अमाउंट ऑफ रेस्ट आपका इम्प्रूव कर रहा है यहाँ पे, वो आप थोड़ा सा
Yes.
क्लियर करेंगे?
So, ma'am, these, as you can see, that if you just look through these three, like if I don't know if you can see my cursor, if so those bundles of activity has been placed at a interval of 2 hours. So here it implies 2 hours. So they think that 2 hours rest has been taken by the patient, and they have given them adequate environment to do that. And for this experiment, it's 2 hours. But for the rest in workplace, obviously, I've told you that the studies vary in their duration. 15 minutes they have just made an equation: 15 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hours. That varies. So this is for this one. It is
एग्जैक्टली वो जो हम बोलते हैं कि वर्क प्लेस पे आपको नैप लेना चाहिए, राइट?
हाँ.
फॉर बेटर वर्किंग, तो
Yes,
इट
ma'am.
हैज टू बी एटलीस्ट मिनिमम हैज टू बी 15 मिनट्स, राइट?
Yes, ma'am. The minimum that I found in the studies were 15 minutes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
I think the workplace requirement and demand will actually play a role in how much time they will give napping to a certain person. Also.
So if we don't have any other comment or question, maybe we can conclude today's